In a world where Africans have lost their roots, it has become of vital importance to document our ways. In an effort to reverse the brainwashing of the past, where we were made to believe our ways are demonic, we are pressed to create dignified and respectful platforms to unpack our spiritual ways. Umoya Ulight, Umoya Upright, welcome to another exciting episode of Umoya. Gamalam Ntsiki Mazwai. Thank you so much, guys, for all the support. The podcast is growing. I'm so such a great space. Thank you for liking, for sharing, for subscribing. As I always tell you that this is not the type of content that YouTube is going to promote, so it's going to be up to you to do the pushing of the product. Thank you to all our sponsors, and the bank details are on screen right now. Please do continue supporting us. We do see you in the bank account. It's exciting. It's 2024. We're going into an election year, and so now it's time for us to round ourselves up and to understand how we got here as African people, our political systems. We had an episode last week where we were speaking about the chiefs and the kingdoms and how the ANC was actually formed by chiefs and kingdoms and all coming together, and how now it's been captured by the whites. And so now I called on an elder who's going to break down perhaps a little bit of pre-apartheid times to show us where we went wrong. And I think this is the perfect voice to do this, because he's always been a dissenting voice amongst the media. When people are saying this, he's like, no, guys, it's that way. So Tatu Moeletsi Mbeki, what a privilege, what an honor. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Ntsiki, it's great to be on your podcast show.
Thank you. You know, we're very homely here, so we do want a little bit of you.
Okay, sure.
If you can give us a little bit of your background. All I know about you is that you're a privileged kid. So please, can you give us...
Yes, you know, I come from what I call the elite in the Eastern Cape. We had, in the 19th century, we had a section of the African elite that collaborated with the British during those huge wars. So I think my ancestors were part of the
sellouts.
Of the sellout.
Because I'm like, you're so proud of the story, and I'm like, I tell you, you sold us out.
So they were part of the sellout, and they got a vote in return. Remember, the Cape had a constitution which did not discriminate according to your race.
Oh, really? No, we don't know that.
Oh, no,
so you're going to have to unpack it, guys.
Okay, I have to go back a bit.
Yes.
Okay, what happened was that the British couldn't succeed to defeat the Xhosas. So they had to find allies from amongst the Xhosa people. Mm-hmm. But then they had to give those allies something in return. Mm-hmm. So then they drew up a constitution in 1853, which was the Constitution of the Cape, which was the British colony.
Okay.
And in that constitution, if you could write your name and you had property worth £25, which is 50 rands or then, mm-hmm. you could vote.
Oh, okay.
So you didn't have to be black. It had nothing to say about black or white or anything. It just said you had to be able to...
This is in the 1800s?
This is 1850.
Okay.
So it's many years ago.
Yes.
So the people who were collaborating with the British, when they captured the land and the cattle were divided amongst themselves. Mm. So then they had the property. That was point number one. And then point number two, the British, with their missionaries, set up schools. And one of the most famous of those schools is called Lovedale. Mm. There were others, Hilltown, Clarksbury, and so on. So those people got educated in those schools. So And then they emerged amongst the Africans a middle class, a new middle class, which were these collaborators, if you wish. They became a middle class. And then, of course, the British, being the British, when they discovered gold, they then sold out their middle class partners. They abandoned them and teamed up with the Afrikaners to run their mines. So then my ancestors then had to fight back again against the British. So that's where the ANC came from, was now trying to protect the vote that they had. And so then they had to set up organizations like that, like they were called vigilance associations. I'm not quite sure why vigilance, but anyway, eventually they came together to form the ANC in 1912.
Okay.
And then they decided, before the ANC was formed, that they need a university. So they started collecting money from 1908 to build a university, which is today Fort Hare University. So the collaborators and the African middle class put in the money to build Fort Hare University. So that's where Fort Hare University comes from. It was built by the African people in the Eastern Cape who raised money amongst themselves. And it was eventually, the initiative started in 1908, and it was eventually opened in 1916. And so my family, my father went to Fort Hare University in the 1930s. But his father was one of the contributors to the money to build the university. So that's a long story, but very interesting.
It is, and we're here for it. So now we get into your family lineage. So your grandfather helps in the setting up of the university. Yeah. Then your father comes in, and what's his impact? Because then it's you guys, and what does it mean? Like, what is your family doing in the history of our country?
Well, my grandfather is part of funding the university. Then his son, which was my father, was born in 1910. Mm-hmm. He went to Lovedale, the missionary high school, but when he matriculated, he then went to Fort Hare University. So that's where he studied. Mm. And at Fort Hare University, he then became involved in politics. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, he got influenced very much by an African American who was a communist. So,
what's his name? Is it a famous person?
I can't remember his name now. I think it was Yegin, something like that. So both my mother and my father were influenced by this communists. So my parents joined the Communist Party in 1936, 31, somewhere in the 1930s. So, as well as being members of the ANC, they were members of the Communist Party.
Okay.
So.
But that explains when you think about it, it influences your politics later on, right?
Yes. You see now because now they are left wing and all that.
Yes.
They realize that those days African intellectuals mainly got jobs teaching. And where they taught, of course, these were either missionary schools or government schools. So my parents realized that with their left-wing views, they won't be able to get very far teaching. In fact, I think my father he taught at Adams in Amanzi Mtoti in KZN.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
But I think he was fired for his radical politics from that. So they decided to set up a shop. So they set up a general dealership shop in the Transkei, in a village called Mbeoleni, which is about 10 miles outside Dutcha. So we grew up in the shop.
Okay.
So we were shopkeepers. We were, I think, from as young as 5 or 6, we were working in the shop. And my mother was in charge of the shop. So yes, so that was it.
I want to know about the political influence, Ke. Please, can you stop pretending that you don't come from a political elite family in the country? We would like to know about the Mbekis and the... How did you become you?
Well, at home we had a library, for example.
Yes, because your dad's a teacher.
Yeah, and my mother.
Okay, yes.
So we had a library at home, and there were lots of newspapers. The East London Daily Dispatch was there. So from a very early age, we started reading newspapers. We had to read newspapers. And I remember, I think I was about 10 or something. I found a novel in the bookshelf written by a famous Russian author called Maxim Gorky.
Okay.
Maxim Gorky, the novel, I still remember the title because it was so hard to read. It was called Former Gudiev, and it was about sailors on the Volga River and the tough life that they were having on the Volga River. Now you can imagine in the middle of Transkei, first there's no river there, well, there's a little Kai River. But the Volga River is like a lake in the eyes of a South African. It's a massive river.
Yeah.
And then the life of the sailors and the workers working on the boats and so on. It was a very fascinating story. So at home, there was lots of discussion about political issues anyway. So, yeah.
Okay. So then you grow, and then we get to 94. Where are your thoughts and where are your feelings? And because I kind of remember that you're almost like a black sheep. Without offending you, but your voice wasn't the same.
Well, I was in exile, like many people.
Okay.
In the UK, in Tanzania, in Zimbabwe, United States. I spent some time in the United States. So because I was a student in the 60s in exile, got even more politicized because the 1960s was the age of turmoil in the world. It was the age of growth economically, but also of a lot of intellectual turmoil. So we had to study our own history as students. Fortunately, because England had colonized South Africa, there was a lot of original material in British libraries, especially the British Museum. So all the reports that had been written by the colonial governors about what is happening in South Africa were at the British Museum library. So we could go to the library. It is open to everyone. It's a public library, actually, in the United Kingdom. You could go there and then start to read all these reports about the wars in South Africa. We now actually read about them from. So anyway, eventually I started working as a journalist. And so when 1994 came, I had been, when I came back in 1990, let's say when the ANC got unbanned,
Okay.
I was recruited by COSATU to become head of communication of the communication department in COSATU. So up to 1993, I was working for COSATU, which was itself quite radical those days. Today, COSATU is a bit of a sheep, but in the 1990s, in the 1980s, J. Naidu was the general secretary, and COSATU was very militant. It was a bit suspicious of the ANC. They thought the ANC might sell them out and so on. Remember, the two didn't know each other that well, although they supported the Freedom Charter, COSATU, and the ANC. They shared that common document, but they didn't know it. They only started working together in 1990 in a systematic, open way. So,
and when you say it's not the same as, I'm sorry if I cut you off, as if you're saying COSATU has changed, please unpack that for us.
Okay, when I joined COSATU in 1990, I think the largest union in COSATU was the National Union of Mine Workers.
Yeah.
And Cyril was the general secretary of the National Union of Mine Workers. I think the second largest union was the metal workers, NUMSA. And then you had transport unions. So COSATU those days was mainly a unions of industrial workers.
Okay.
Today, COSATU is mainly a union of public servants, of teachers, policemen, and so on. So it's changed from being an industrial workers union to being a union of civil servants almost. So obviously the atmosphere is not as radical with it's really white collar workers. You see, before it was blue collar workers, and now it's white collar workers. I think the teacher now, the education and health work, I think is the largest union in COSATU today, followed by SADTU, the South African Democratic Teachers Union. So they have a lot of professionals in the union, whereas before, or in my day in COSATU, it was mainly industrial workers and mining workers, agriculture workers, people in food processing. For example, a huge union called Food and Allied Workers, which worked in food processing, manufacturing, and so on.
When you say that Cyril was already a leader back then.
Yes, he was the General Secretary of National Union of Mine Workers.
Please unpack that a little bit for us. And in terms of, because when there's a picture I once saw, and that National Union was, and their lawyers were very, very white. So I want to understand if this union was genuinely a black cause, or it was a union that was created by the other side to sort of just buffer and...
No, it was a genuine black union. It was actually, interestingly, the union was created by the black consciousness people.
Oh.
And then, and I'm not quite sure what Cyril's role was in all that, it then decided to join the pro-ANC, which supported the Freedom Charter. Now, how the transition happened from being a black consciousness union to a pro-ANC.
Charterist.
Yes, charterist. Now, I'm not quite sure of the story. Maybe you should get Cyril to come here and answer,
Maybe I should.
and answer your question as to what happened. What happened in between.
Yes.
But when I was in COSATU, now Cyril of course, the National Union of Mine Workers, as I said, was the largest union in COSATU. So the Central Committee, he sat in the Central Committee of COSATU. I also sat in the Central Committee as head of a department of COSATU, which was communication. So for a few months before he then got elected to become Secretary General of the ANC in 1991, I think. So yes, that. But after 90, when the agreement was arrived at about when the elections were going to be, I decided I spent all my life in the ANC. I needed to do something different. So I decided not to go to Parliament. I was actually asked to go to the Gauteng Parliament. I said, no, I think I'll start a business.
What was that decision driven by?
I don't know who, but I was just told that.
No, I'm saying from your personal. Why would you not take a place in Parliament?
Well, first, I knew that the ANC had made a good deal, had gotten a good deal, but not enough to change the country.
They got a deal for themselves.
Well, not really. I mean, the deal gave a vote for all South Africans. So it wasn't just for the ANC.
But the deal also made them quite comfortable economically.
Well, I guess so, yes. So my assessment of the situation then was that there's going to be a lot of infighting in the ANC, within the ANC, because they don't have enough space in the economic side of things. Because all the negotiations were really about the political side of life, and so, hence the constitution. But now, once you have the political rights, then what happens to your economic welfare? How does that? So I thought, this is not gonna be work, and I really didn't want to spend my time now fighting within the ANC about economic issues, which I could see they were coming. So I decided, let me go ahead and learn something new. So I went out and set up a media company. Anyway, I had been a media consultant to the ANC to try and set up an ANC newspaper. And that was sabotaged by the white newspaper companies, that effort, because they control, South Africa is controlled by very powerful interests. So they control the distribution and they control the printing. So if we set up then as ANC a newspaper, they had to distribute it and they had to print it. So they were in fact in real control.
Yeah.
Because one of them told me, okay, Mr. Mbeki, if we print your newspaper, it was supposed to be a morning daily newspaper. And they were the owners of the Sowetan those days. So he told me that, well, we'll have to start printing your paper at 4 in the afternoon. But this is supposed to be a morning paper for the following day, which meant they could take all my stories and put them in the Star in their newspaper, which was the Star, because that's who I was negotiating with. So the whole thing didn't work out.
But even the whole Sowetan being owned by white people.
Oh, yeah, no, it was owned by a company called the Argus newspapers.
Yes.
And the Argus newspaper was actually group, if I'm not mistaken, was set up by Cecil Rose, the big exploiter in the diamond world.
Owabulala abantu abamnyama goed as games and sports.
Yeah. So that he set up the Argus newspaper in the Transvaal in the 19th century. And
so when you say, let's go back to Codesa, because now we want to talk about the implications and how we're getting to today. And so can you unpack the whole story for us? Where did we go wrong? And
Okay. You see, what happened in South Africa, especially now in the 80s, let's say from the 70s onwards, the black people started to be more organized. And they set up trade unions like the National Union of Mine Workers. And then there were lots of strikes that started to happen. So these were destabilizing the economy. So the big capitalists went to the nationalist government, the Afrikaner nationalist government, and said, look, this apartheid thing of yours is causing trouble for our profit making. Now, you have to find a way to get rid of it.
so it wasn't even about black people dying. It
was about their profit, that the strikes in the mine. Cyril, for example, led a huge strike in the mining industry, I think in 1987. The mining industry was shut down.
And then fast forward Marikana.
Oh, well.
The irony?
It is incredible, right? He led one of the biggest strikes by black mine workers. The first largest strike was led by a man called J.B. Marx. J.B. Marx was from the Communist Party, and he was sent to organize the mine workers during the Second World War. And then they went on strike in 1946. And of course, the strike was repressed by the regime. Then the next biggest strike in the mine was the one led by Cyril in 1987. And, well, as you point out, then one of the biggest slaughters of mine workers was also by Cyril's company, which was Lonmin. So you can see the evolution of
the revolutionary.
You can see this evolution of this revolutionary, counter-revolution, you name it.
What do you think happens? Because it does seem to play out like that, where people can be bought, or what's happening with Black revolution?
What's happening with the Black revolution? Well, it's you have to. We will have to spend the whole week talking about that. You see, there were a number of influences that changed, that led to the negotiations. The first one, of course, were the liberation movements, which were recognized by the Organization of African Unity, which was the ANC and the Pan-Africanist Congress. So those were the leadership of the African people, those two. They were the main leadership.
Yes.
And then we had the civil society, like the trade unions, which were supportive of the liberation movements.
About upline, when things like that.
No, I'm talking about the trade union.
About NUMSA,
and all the others. So that was one stream of resistance, of attack against the apartheid system. The other stream was international support for the Black struggle in South Africa, especially students in the United Kingdom, in the United States, the churches in the United States, and so on. And so they put pressure on companies in their own country to disinvest from South Africa, so that they don't make profit from exploiting of black people in South Africa. So, for example, what is today First National Bank used to be Barclays Bank, which was a British bank. But a lot of the bankers in Barclays Bank in the United Kingdom, which was its home, were students. So the students pressurized Barclays Bank to sell its shares in South Africa and disinvest from South Africa.
What?
And you got the same thing in the United States. Coca-Cola, for example, was pressurized to sell its operations in South Africa, which it sold to South African breweries. And so that was the other pressure. And then you had countries like India, China refusing to trade with South Africa. And other African countries. So there were a multiplicity of pressures. And then one of the biggest changes was the Americans. There was a huge campaign for the United States to put sanctions on South Africa because, of course, they didn't have any sanctions. But the people were mobilized by anti-apartheid organization. And eventually, Congress decided to pass a law imposing sanctions on South Africa. And so what became clear to the guys in South Africa who were making all the money and all the profit was that their little house of cards was going to collapse. So the businessmen said to P.W. Botha, who was then president, that, look, man, this thing has got to change. So on the trade union side, for example, Botha set up commissions of inquiry as to what to do about the trade unions. Should we legalize them so that their contracts are binding and so on? So a famous commission called the Vian Commission made a recommendation that the black trade unions must be legalized so that their contracts with the management are legally binding for both sides, for both the management and the trade union. So then you start to have business, especially big business, getting involved in demanding scrap. Apartheid is now...
It's making us broke.
It's making us broke. So there was a man who was the head of Anglo-American at the time, the biggest company in South Africa. Owned gold mines, diamond mines, banks, you name it. So I think when was it, 1985? He said, we have to talk to the ANC directly. But the ANC was a banned organization. So he said, I'm going to talk to them because we have to come to some understanding as to where are we going. So the then President P.W. Botha said, if you go here and go to Zambia to talk to the ANC, remember you are breaking the law. And he threatened to shoot down the aircraft. But the man went anyway with a business. So they negotiated with the ANC. Now, for your next one of your podcasts, you should try and get the guys who were at that meeting in Zambia in 1985 or whatever, I think it was around there, to explain to us what did they negotiate with Anglo-American.
Who are these people? I know one of them.
Yeah, one of them was my brother, another one, I think, Chris Hani, he's no longer with us, but I think Paulo Jordan was there. So you can, I think Penuel Maduna, if I'm not mistaken, they are still around.
Okay. So there's a meeting that happened with Botswana with Anglo-American.
In Zambia.
In Zambia.
Yeah.
That we need to unpack.
So that needs to be, because then did the ANC have some kind of an agreement or understanding? Because now Anglo-American was now pressurizing the apartheid regime to scrap apartheid. So in a way, they were more or less on the same side.
Yes.
But for different reasons.
Yes.
But So
Because when you speak of Anglo-American even, we just learned that the gold reserves are supporting the unemployment fund in England.
how are they?
So in England, they get an unemployment stipend, and it's from our mines, basically.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
While we are just
Yeah, no, the English have been cheating us since they came here in
right.
1795.
So then, what happens? Because I want us to get to now post 94. Because we eventually have to get to the point of now we're at MK.
Yeah. Oh,
Right?
you mean the new party?
The new party.
Oh.
Because now we're moving from 94. Because right now that's what's happening. And
You see, as I pointed out that personally, I thought there was going to be a lot of conflict inside the ANC,
yes,
especially about the economic policy of the government. And that would be point number one. Point number two, the big corporations in the country were going to look for partners from inside the ANC who would not want things to change.
exactly.
So what big business came up with, which I must give credit to them, a strategy to neutralize this anti-business because, they had been exploiting the Africans from the days of slavery, actually, going back to the 17th century. So they knew that black people in South Africa were hostile to them. So they came up with a scheme called Black Economic Empowerment. So with this scheme called Black Economic Empowerment, they then went to leaders of the ANC, especially the ones who were not in exile, the ones who were inside the country. They went to these leaders and said, we are very sorry we oppressed you. We want to repent for our bad ways. So we'll give you some money. You personally, not
the collective.
People. No,
Yeah.
You,
Just you, Patrice.
yes, you, Patrice, you, Cyril Ramaphosa, and so on.
Yes.
So they then, Sanlam was actually the leader of this movement. Sanlam had a company called Metropolitan Life, which was a life insurance company. Most of his holders of life policies were African and colored. But it was a big company listed in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. So Sanlam said, okay, you can take over this company. What we will do, we will go to IDC, which was run by one of the Afrikaner guys, and borrow money for you to borrow money from IDC, Industrial Development Corporation. And then you buy shares in Metropolitan and you become the majority voter in this. And then you can pay yourself whatever you want. So they chose these black leaders. So they chose the black leaders if I remember correctly. The head of this black initiative was a man called Dr. Ndato Mutlana. Ndato Mutlana was a medical doctor living in Soweto, and he had been very involved in the struggle against apartheid. From when he was a student at Forte, when he had been in the ANC Youth League in the 40s or 50s. And so he was a genuine revolutionary. So he put together this team to buy, in inverted commas, because actually they didn't have the money to buy. Then Cyril was one of them. Zwelakhe Sisulu, who the son of the late Walter, was also one of them. Sam Mutsonyane, Dr. Sam Mutsunyane, who set up the African Bank. And he was head of NAFCOC at some stage. He founded one of the founders of NAFCOC. He was also in on the scheme. Who else? There was somebody, I think his name was Mukhali, but I can't remember, from FAPCOS. You see, NAFCOC was pro-ANC, FAPCOS was pro-PAC. Oh yeah, no, they had the Hang Museneke, who was vice president of the PAC. So he was also brought in. Because this is like in the early 90s. So these guys set up this black economic empowerment. Many people naively think that black economic empowerment is there to advance black people. Actually, it's there to do the opposite.
Shucks, it's to create black fronts, to
It's
create
to
the
create,
impression
of
a black
or
excellence.
people, partners, black partners for big business in South Africa.
So then, is there black excellence without white influence?
Well,
Because these names you're naming are people that we look up to and respectable, and it's like these are the people that, So when we hear that it was created by the system, then what does that mean?
Sure. That's why I was saying it's a long story. A very long story. Well, let's take one step back. The wealth of South Africa was largely created by black South Africans. Well, first they owned the land.
Yeah.
So it was their land.
Yeah.
So it was taken from them, and the minerals under the land were also taken from them. However, they became the workers to build the mine. So in real terms, the profits and the capital belongs to them as well.
Yes.
Belongs to them. So when we're talking about capital in South Africa, it actually is a national asset. But people think it's a white man this, a white man that. Actually, the reality, if you look
It's supposed to be.
But it is a national asset. If you look
But we're not benefiting. It's not our asset if we're not benefiting.
No, it is our asset. If you look at companies at the stock exchange, listed at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, one of the main shareholders in those companies is the government employees pension fund. So they're big shareholders in these big companies. So that goes towards their pension. But when you have medical aid, when you pay for your medical aid, it's managed by somebody because you are not sick every day.
Yes.
So it isn't spent for most of the time. It's sitting with the medical. So the medical aid company gives that money to fund managers who then invest it in the big companies in the stock exchange. But you don't know that, but they do it. You see, so when you actually start to look at who owns these big companies in South Africa, many people naively think the white managers own them. They don't. Actually, a big part of some of these big companies are owned by the black people through their pension funds, their medical aid, their whatever it is, savings that they have to make. But they don't understand that how then to get the profit and to have a say in how these companies are managed. They just give it to fund managers. Because the fund managers say, okay, Ntsiki, one day you will be 70 and you will need a pension. So give me your savings today. I will manage them for you.
These things they call annuities.
Yes, and we'll do all that for you. but that money buys shares in the companies in the Johannesburg stock. So you are actually a co-owner of Anglo-American.
But you don't know it though.
Well, you don't know because you are not asking. It's because you are not asking. So nobody will tell you. If you don't ask, well, they won't tell. But your money, your savings are in Sanlam, in Old Mutual. You are a co-owner of this. So we have to be careful about who owns the wealth of South Africa. A lot of the wealth of South Africa is actually owned by black people. But they are not insisting that, okay, do this with my wealth, don't do.
So how do we do that? Because, I mean, a lot of us would love to know. We don't know how to take control of our power. That's what the problem is.
That's where the problem is that we have a lot of power. The black people in South Africa have a lot of power. But as you say, they don't quite know how to use their power. And of course, the other side is not going to tell you. They say, leave it to us, we will invest the money, and now and then we'll pay your pension or whatever it is that, out the profits that come from. So that's what really our trade unions were supposed to do. One of the things they were supposed to do. In fact, when I was at COSATU, I suggested that they set up a bank of their own, COSATU. Because COSATU then had 1.8 million members.
Whoa.
And these were paying every week subscription. So I said, let's set up a bank, a commercial bank, which will finance black entrepreneurs, which will finance housing for our members who were living in the shanty towns. But I was overruled. Now, I won't say who.
You're allowed to, I must tell you. We like juice here.
I was overruled by my boss, which was Jay Naidu.
Oh, my word.
I don't know who else he was talking to. And yeah.
It's so strange that you would be overruled when you say, let's create a black bank. And we always hear how there's all these obstacles and barriers into entry, especially into the banking system.
If COSATU had created a bank, then we wouldn't be talking about barriers to entry and all those things.
Exactly.
You see, we wouldn't. But for some reason, since he said no, I haven't asked Jay Naidu. That was many years ago.
Why did you stop my idea of the bank?
No, because he was my boss.
Yes, I was saying you need to ask him.
I had persuaded the then president of the Development Bank of Southern Africa, DBSA, to help COSATU to set up the bank. And there was an Afrikaans gentleman called Simon Brandt. He liked my idea. He thought it was a good idea. So he said he will set up the bank. But he had to get an instruction from the general secretary. And the general secretary, of course, had to get an instruction from the central committee. And so now the approval list gets bigger and bigger. And then
That's why I was asking, was it genuinely black unions, or is there Isanda Zemfene somewhere?
No, I think it was genuinely. There were white people working there, but they weren't the only ones. I mean, the great majority were black workers who were the shop stewards who ran the union at the factory floor. So they were real black organizations.
Okay, so now as we wrap up, I want to talk about, do you think that we have followed the correct trajectory since 94? Or where did we lose it? Or what went wrong?
Well, the negotiations from my side, I think, were fine. We got a constitution that is relatively a good constitution in terms of the intention of equality, of getting equality for all South Africans, political equality. And it has worked reasonably well. What was not in the negotiations was the economic side of things.
Which was the most important thing, because I mean, what the hell? What's the point of a vote if without economic policy?
But economic policy in the so-called capitalist democratic system is made by the ruling party, whoever is the ruling party. That is the rationale why it's not in the constitution. Is that the ruling party, once it gets elected, it makes the economic changes if it wants to make. So the ANC hasn't been making much.
I was about to get to that, because I was going to say that I remember that they could only change the constitution after a 2/3 majority. And they did get a 2/3 majority, but they did not change economic policies. So what would that be?
No, the economic
influenced
policy
by?
was running, it had to be made by Parliament, you see, running on a separate track.
Okay.
But it was, the ANC had the power, and it still has the power to come up with an economic policy that benefits everybody. But as I pointed out, through things like black economic empowerment, a lot of its leaders have been co-opted to just leave things as they are.
They've been given their mansions
Their mansions, and many are billionaires and given the shares. And so
they're far removed from the needs of the people.
very, very far removed. So they are not going to be making policies that make the guys who gave them the money unhappy, because then...
But then that would speak to then, are you suggesting that ANC is captured? Because then if they're not making policies and decisions that their handlers don't like, then it would mean that the ANC does not represent the people.
Well, Ntsiki, that's why I said you need another podcast with Cyril. He is the president of the, and ask him that question. Let's hear what his answer.
I don't think he's gonna come. He keeps running away.
So try and get him. Try.
And then to close off, what did you think of MK then?
The MK party, I think this, Jacob Zuma is a man of great drama. He is a dramatist, if there's ever been one. And he knows how to create drama.
To play to the gallery, right?
Yes. This is another drama event where it will lead to, I don't think he cares very much where it leads to, as long as it creates the drama. So, yeah.
And what are your wishes? I mean, as a young person, obviously, I think that your generation, I don't understand why they're hanging on to positions, and it's frustrating because we are in our prime and we've got the energy to move the country forward, but we've got these elders.
Remember there's a famous song by Bob Marley, None But Ourselves. Mm-hmm. Well, the young people in South Africa have to realize nobody's going to give them power.
Yeah.
They have to
take it
themselves.
It's because it conflicts with how we're brought up as Africans. We have to respect the elders.
Forget to respect the elders. This is now about power.
Yeah.
And it's about the future of your children and your grandchildren and the future of the country, and stopping these huge explosions that happen in South Africa now and then, like what happened in July 2021. Yeah. But nobody's going to give you that power. from our generation, we, as I say, many of us in ANC got what to me looks like crumbs. But anyway, we got these crumbs from the big corporations, and we're not going to change anything.
It's difficult because, Nani, you're meant to be our guidance and our leaders and to be mentoring us, but you're not doing that.
Nobody's going to mentor you to make change. You have to sort it out yourself, because now the future is for you. For us, our future is gone. So the future of the country, you have to determine the future of the country, because it affects you. Me, I'll be dead in another few years. So, frankly, I'm not.
And then as the youth, I'm going to give you the two between Malema and Zungula.
Yeah.
Where are you looking?
No, you see, at least they are trying. They say they are trying. When I read what they're saying, when I look at Malema, the economic policy, the EFF, a lot of their economic policies come from the ANC's Freedom Charter, which was written in 1955.
By white people, by you?
Whoever wrote it, but it was an ANC document. So if you are going to set up a future of South Africa on the basis of a 1955 document, well, that's not going to be much of a future because the document is obsolete anyway. It may have been dynamic in 1955. In 2024, well, it's no longer relevant. So these new young people setting up parties, of course, is their right to set up the parties. But where are the policies that will change the economy of South Africa so that it overcomes the unemployment? It gives electricity to everyone and water and so on. Where are those policies? Well, I don't see them in these new parties that are being set up.
That's scary.
Yeah, it is scary, very scary, because all they're doing is criticize the ANC government here and there. But the ANC, at the end of the day, did what it could under its circumstances. The new generation has to come up with its model of a new future for South Africa. Criticizing the ANC will not give you a model of a new future for South Africa. You have to sit down and say, what new future do I want for my country? And it's not happening. Well, I haven't seen any evidence of it.
That's deep. So the grown-ups are saying that the young people are not good enough, and the young people are saying that the grown-ups are not good enough.
Yeah, but this blame game is taking both nowhere. The young people must get on and find and come up with their vision of a new South Africa. That's different from the one we have today. And we do need, the new generation needs a different South Africa.
We do.
Because the present South Africa is very unstable, and we have 70 murders every day in South Africa. What kind of a country is that? Where you every, I don't know how many minutes there's a rape in South Africa. So South Africa is a very unstable country. But it's unstable. It is affecting the younger generation because now they have no future. If the country has no future, then the young generation have no future either. And that is the real challenge.
And then one day we're also going to have to speak about how this money has affected our family dynamics.
Oh, totally. Oh, then,
Yeah, no, that's an hour on its own.
Very much
Hey,
so.
hey, especially this privilege, it's
Yeah.
really broken our families and
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, these guys who are into the BEE schemes, that's one of the main drivers of corruption. Are these BEE schemes? But for big business, as long as you don't touch my business, when you steal, actually, a lot of the corruption is stealing taxpayers' money.
and we're willing to sacrifice each other.
Yes, all those things.
It's so deep. I mean, I don't mean to throw my father under the bus too, but he chose the president essentially over his own child because it's scary to speak truth to power and to.
Yeah, no, it's very tough. But, I understand my generation, which is your father's generation. We are all tangled up in all sorts of things. And it's not just the whites who put the ropes and the strings. There are other black people who also, and then there are foreigners who also get us all tied up. And so it goes on.
Sure, we're too easy to infiltrate.
Yeah, no, we have to be tougher. That's why I'm saying, for me, the young generation that is going, whether they like it or not, they will take over the country because the old guys who are running the country now are going to die.
Yes. Hey, we had to wait for long, yeah?
You don't have long to wait, so you have to take the country. and I sit there sometimes wondering, I see these guys saying they are setting up little parties, and I ask myself, why don't you, the 2 or 3 of you, join together? Songezo Zibi is setting another party there, Mpo is setting another one there, Malema is setting up. So I say, hello, guys. But anyway, do as you like, but very soon, you are going to have to run the country. And if you are not prepared to get your act together, you will be landed with, then all the problems will be yours.
Datu Mbeki, thank you, Zizelihle, for spending your time with us. I know that you guys are so busy, so we appreciate it.
No, it's wonderful to have the conversation.
Thank you.
I'm glad. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, always. You are our gem. We love you. And please keep speaking out because as Black Sheep, we also like our leaders.
Thank you, Ntsiki.
Umoya Ulight, Umoya Ubright. Guys, thank you so much for another delicious episode. A lot of kaklas were there. We told you that the privileged blacks are a problem, guys. The privileged blacks are a problem. The bank details are on screen. Let's crowdfund, build our platform so that we can get more of our history. We are recoding our DNA so that we can fix ourselves, so that our future looks a little bit better than it's looking now. Gamalam, gunonzikelelo, wagwa Mazwai. Thank you once again for joining, and thank you to Send Studios for their professional services every time. Blessings.
Who are you when all you were has been diluted by lies and white lines cancelling out all that which has been written of your history? Why do you look at yourself as a mystery? Doesn't the sun shine because you open your eyes? Doesn't the moon stay situated within the same stars your DNA sparkles off? Your spirit knows that surely corner into it off. Buza umoya so you may return to being well off. Because spiritually you are rich, yet your ancestors cry because you are out of reach. But yours is to command all elements while God takes inspiration from the very mirror she looked at to become. Remember who you are and never finish just when they think that with you they are done.